every day, even not on a special day. Now, I do have a special guest who wants to send you a little message tonight.
Happy Valentine's Day.
This is our junior CWO, our Chief Wedding Officer, and she helps me make all my important decisions, don't you? Yes. And she's also all over the holidays. So happy Valentine's Day from myself and my mini me over here.
Happy Valentine's Day.
I love you. Now, on this Valentine's Day, I am unfortunately not live with you again. It seems to be a trend in the last couple of weeks, but I'm actually at a play tonight. I'm seeing Romeo and Juliet, because what better to see on Valentine's Day than a story of love and death? You know. Anyway, even if I'm not live, I welcome questions. I welcome comments. You can always post in a comment to this video. You can also contact us directly through the DMs or by emailing at amy@unmistakably.you.com. Tonight, we are here to talk about something that is really pretty darn important, if I do say so myself, and that is your wedding ceremony. Now, I quite often have couples who say, oh, we just want it to be fast so we can get to the party. But let's be honest, what's the reason for your day, right? Like, if you don't actually have a ceremony, you're just really kind of throwing an expensive party. So let's talk about what you actually need to make your ceremony legal, and what you don't need, or what you can include if you want, or change, or adapt, or completely take out. So here's the thing, is that every ceremony is different. Every religious tradition has its own requirements and its own ceremony templates that they use. Every non-religious officiant certainly has templates that they use and suggestions that they can make for you, but they definitely aren't set in stone if we're talking about a secular ceremony. Whereas sometimes with a religious ceremony, your hands might be tied a little bit. You may be able to personalize in some areas, but you may find that you get some pushback from the officiant in other areas. So here's the thing. Let's talk religious institutions first. So if you are getting married in a Catholic church, or in a Greek church, or a Jewish synagogue, there are going to be requirements from the religion. And I think that's probably something that you've likely accepted just because you may have attended weddings of your friends or family in the same institution, and you kind of know the way that it goes. The reality with religious weddings is that they are kind of tied to the tenets of their religion and the requirements that have been set forward over the, past number of decades, or sometimes even more than that, depending on the institution. And so sometimes if you're getting married in a church or a synagogue or a mosque or whatever your institution is, you may be a little bit limited by the flexibility of your officiant. Now, these days, sometimes we're seeing young officiants who are a little bit more flexible in terms of what they can personalize and what they can't. Realistically, if you're getting married in a religious institution, there are probably going to be limitations on how much you can actually change. But if you have a young kind of hip officiant, maybe they're going to be a little bit more open to you including things that you choose, or changing the verbiage a little bit on some of their sort of pre-written ceremony scripts, if you will. Now, absolutely, it really depends. I was just at a wedding last weekend, and the officiant actually said, and I literally was in shock, officiant literally said to the groom at the ceremony, now you have to promise not to be afraid to talk to your wife about things. And then he turned to the bride and said, and you have to promise not to screech and scream at your husband. And I went, are you serious? Is this 2024? And I'm not going to tell you where or when or why that happened. I will protect the guilty here. But realistically, sometimes officiants who are a little bit old school, who've maybe been with their religious affiliation for a long time, they're maybe not as open to changing some of those words. I did a wedding years ago, like literally 10 or 12 years ago, where it was an older couple. They were quite obviously past childbearing age, and they were getting married in the Catholic Church. And the priest said, "Will you accept children lovingly from God?" And I was like, okay, like, sure, but they're past that age. And the fact that they were unwilling to even change that verbiage just kind of indicates, first of all, the requirements of the institution, but then secondly, the sort of flexibility of the officiant. So if you are getting married in a church or religious institution of some kind, know that some officiants are going to be pretty by the book and some are maybe going to allow some adaptations. So it is definitely worthwhile to sit down with that officiant or with whoever it is that manages the weddings for the place of worship where you're getting married, and just kind of say, listen, like, we're wondering if we can see the ceremony, read over it, maybe kind of have an idea of what the officiant is going to say, and then they may allow you to have some input in certain areas, hopefully. Now, if you are having a secular ceremony, and so by that I mean non-religious or moderately religious, you can of course include however much or how little you want when you're not getting married in a religious institution. And usually you'll have the flexibility to determine that with your officiant. If you're getting married with just, an officiant that you hired who does this on the side or who has a business as a wedding officiant, and you're getting married in a cornfield or at a golf course or at a wedding venue that's not a religious church or synagogue or something like that, then you probably have a lot more flexibility in terms of customizing your ceremony. And I would always advise you to sit down and meet with that officiant before you hire them and say, listen, what does it look like if we want to adapt parts of your typical ceremony? How can we personalize it? Which parts are we able to customize and which are we not? And that'll give you a really good feel for how easy it's going to be to work with that officiant, and whether or not you actually do want to work with that officiant. So always gauge that before you hire an officiant. But most secular officiants are going to say, hey, yeah, absolutely, we can customize anything you want. And that's awesome. But there are a few parts that cannot be adapted within the confines of Ontario law. Now, first and foremost, it's that actual officiant themselves. If you want to be legally married in Ontario, you only have a couple of options. The person performing the wedding ceremony has to be a justice of the peace, or a judge, or a municipal clerk, or someone who is recognized as part of some kind of religious organization. Now, that doesn't mean they necessarily have to preach in church every Sunday. It doesn't mean that they necessarily have any requirements in terms of being a pastor or a minister or a priest. It just means that they've been certified through an organization that is recognized as a religion by the Ontario government. And that can take many, many forms. So definitely, if you have any concerns about the certifying body of your officiant, talk to them about it. Ask them how they're certified. Ask them about any restrictions that their religion or their certifying body may have. There are some out there that won't perform same-sex marriages. Obviously, that's a concern if you are a same-sex couple, or even if you have friends and family who are in same-sex relationships, or your own personal beliefs would prohibit you from hiring someone who's not okay with that. So that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. Let me reel it back in here. The point I'm trying to make is that there are only certain people in Ontario who can legally perform your ceremony. So unfortunately, no, your friend can't easily get ordained online like Joey from Friends and do your ceremony. That doesn't mean you can't have a friend preside over the actual ceremony. It just means there are a couple of extra hoops you have to jump through. So if you do want a friend or a family member who's not a member of a recognized religious organization perform your ceremony, you can have them do that. You just have to either go to City Hall before or after the wedding and make it legal there. You can book an engagement, wrong E word, an elopement package through us at our studio. So the studio by Unmistakably You offers elopements that are, let's be honest, way prettier than City Hall and a lot more personal. We can get you married legally, and then you can have your friend do your ceremony on the actual wedding day. I even had a couple last year who eloped at our studio in the morning, and then they had their actual wedding with their friends presiding later in the afternoon where all their guests attended. And then they had the same anniversary. So it's not like they had to question, well, this was our City Hall and this was our friends and family, and which one's our actual anniversary. You could also absolutely do everything at the same time and have a friend officiate your ceremony, but then have a legal officiant sort of waiting in the wings to take care of the actual legal parts of the ceremony. So what are those legal parts? Well, even though Ontario is super restrictive in terms of who can marry you, what they actually have to say and do in the ceremony is pretty simple. There are just 3 things. They have to have some indication that your intention is to actually get married. So it doesn't have to be vows per se, but it has to be some kind of like, yeah, we want to do this. We know what we're doing. We're cognizant of the commitment that we're making. This is what we're going to do. So that can look a lot of different ways depending on the officiant. One thing that can't look a lot of different ways is that they have to sign the marriage license. You have to have a license from the government of Ontario in order to be legally married in the province of Ontario. So you go and you get that at any city hall or municipal office of your choice. The prices vary depending on the area. You get your license. You have to have it signed at the time of the marriage by a licensed officiant. And that licensed officiant has to say something along the lines of, by the power granted to me by the government of Ontario, I now pronounce you married. It doesn't have to be those words, but it can be the same sentiment. So the 3 things that you need to be legal, well, I guess technically 4, if you count that you have to have a legal officiant. Then you have to have in your actual ceremony some indication of intent. You have to have a legal signing by a registered officiant, and you have to have a pronouncement by a legal officiant. So those are the things that you need in order to have your marriage be legal. So if you really do want to just get that marriage over with, get the ceremony over with, and get right to the party, you could get her done in about 4 minutes if you needed to, if you wanted to. If that's the way you roll, cool, get her done, get married, go to the party. But if you want to embellish a little bit, make it a little bit more personal, incorporate some things that are kind of, like symbolic to you, or little funny things that are important in your relationship, or the story of how you met. There are lots of elements of the ceremony that you should be able to customize if you're dealing with most secular officiants. And these are things that you might want to have a conversation about before you hire your officiant, and then ask how flexible or how accommodating they are when it comes to you incorporating these things. So what I'm talking about are non-necessary, but sometimes nice to have parts of the ceremony, like readings, musical interludes, perhaps, your own personal vows or adapted vows. The officiant's message, that's the part where they talk about, marriage, rah, rah, rah. It can take lots of different forms, but it's nice, I think, if it's a little bit more customized and personal and tailored to the 2 of you as a couple. You can hopefully personalize a unity ceremony if you choose to do something like that. There are tons of options really for ways that you can make your ceremony yours. I've seen tons of creative things over the years. I've seen all kinds of people who take parts of their lives and parts of different traditions and things that maybe their parents did, and they blend them all together into this incredible ceremony that is really truly personal to them and reflective of them as a couple. And that is just so special. I mean, these days I don't get to attend a lot of weddings as a guest. I love it when I do, and I usually can't shut off the wedding planner brain. But if I'm at a wedding, I really want to see the personality of the couple shine through in that ceremony, because that ultimately is the reason for the day. It's the commitment that you're making to each other. So why don't we make those personal little quirks, or those funny little stories, or those things that you enjoy doing together? Why don't we make those part of the ceremony? And make it a lot more personal and unique. And instead of that generic wedding that you might attend every weekend, this is definitely the two of you. Now, if you want more information, couple of ways that I can help you get that. There's a blog on our website that gives you a lot more specific details about things that you can customize and personalize, and ideas of things that I've seen, ideas of things that I've heard, things that are just going to make your ceremony you. So for those specific things, pop on over to our blog. The post is called Creating a Memorable Wedding Ceremony. It should be top of the page. You can check that out there. If you are thinking about writing your own vows, that can be a super daunting concept, especially when you consider that people generally tend to have two main fears in life: snakes, oh heck yes, and public speaking. I'm not as afraid of public speaking, but definitely snakes. If you are afraid of public speaking and you're intending to write your own vows, and maybe you don't know what to say and you're nervous and you're anticipating it with dread, we got you. We are hosting a vow writing workshop with Jody from Something New Officiant at our studio on March the 5th. There are only 3 spaces left. So if you hop on over to our website, it's unmistakablyou.com/workshops. You can grab a ticket for that for you and your partner. We'll give you some refreshments. Jody is a wonderful human who will help guide you through some exercises to figure out what you want to say, how you want to say it, how to feel comfortable saying it. And you will leave there with, if not complete vows, at least a really, really solid start on vows that are going to be meaningful, that you can share with your partner either at the ceremony, or if you're just really too nervous to do it then, we would suggest doing it maybe at a first look, or maybe recording them for a videographer so that they can be used as a voiceover on your video. Lots of ways to include those personal vows, either at your ceremony or otherwise. So don't hesitate to save your seat. Like I said, we only have a couple of spaces left, so pop on over. That's happening March 5th. And as always, if you have questions, concerns, thoughts, anything, I'm happy to hear from you. I always love to hear from anybody who's heard this, so I don't feel like I'm just sitting in a room talking to myself. So hit me up, amy@unmistakablyou.com, send us a DM or post a comment. And until next week, I look forward to hanging out with you online. We'll see you next week. Next week's going to be a little bit late. We're likely to go live about 8:30, 8:45. So just as a heads up, if you're tuning in for 8, if you've got that alarm set, we're going to be a little bit late next week. Until then, happy planning. Take care.